and people maybe join later.
Mm-hmm. Right. I guess I'm sharing the first part of this, huh? Can you all see that pretty well? Or it's loading, but soon. Awesome.
What we got?
And I'll enable some closed captioning for those that need it. I love the software Google Slides now. So glad they have it. All right. Yes, the recording is in progress now. And we were hoping to do a group screenshot of everyone at the beginning, but we might hold on that one until later. Yeah, so in general, this is what our agenda looks like for today. And so we're going to start with everyone introducing themselves and our pretest. And then we are going to be covering 3 different lessons that have been created for this particular grant. It's from the North American Association for Environmental Education. And then we'll end it with some post-tests and wrap-ups. And so in general, we do have a small, bio break, water break in here in between. So I hope you are all have your water with you, but don't drink too much because we only have 1 break. But it is Zoom, so I wouldn't be able to tell if you did leave. And hi, Libby. Good morning.
Morning.
All right. So, Kyla, would you like to introduce yourself first and tell us also a little bit about the research that you do at USC?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Kyla. I'm a graduate student at USC in the marine biology and biological oceanography PhD program. So I study phytoplankton, the little microscopic photosynthetic microbes that float in the ocean and provide 50% of the oxygen we breathe. So super important little guys. But I more specifically study harmful algal blooms. So the less friendly ones that produce toxins that get in our shellfish and can be harmful to human health. But I study this all in the context of climate change. So talking about CO2 and greenhouse gases is up my alley. And so I've been working on this project with DJ and creating a lot of the lessons and the PD here that we're going to do today. So welcome to our PD.
Wonderful. And then my name is Dr. DJ Kast, and I'm the Director of STEM Education for USC's Joint Educational Project. And in general, we run a lot of STEM education programs for schools that are in the surrounding area around USC. So one of our teachers is here today this morning. That's Miss Wynn. She's from Norwood. And unfortunately, Jessica Stellman, she's another graduate student that works with us on a lot of different projects. She's not able to be here this morning. She majorly injured her back last night and is in the ER this morning. So Kyla is going to be covering some of the slides that she was originally set to do. But before we go too much further, I'd love to hear from some of the other people in the room as well. Libby, do you want to go first?
Hi, I'm Libby Birmingham. I'm a 3rd grade teacher in Glendora, California. And I've been teaching for about 13 years now. I won't say how long I've known DJ for though. Too long. We've been friends for too long.
That's true. Miss Wynn, would you like to go next?
Hi, everybody. Good morning. I turned off my video because you said we were recording.
That's fine.
I just want to make sure. So I'm a third grade teacher. We do partner with USC for this, the YSP program, which is amazing. And I know that throughout the year, she does a lot of other stuff. And I think it's a great opportunity. Anytime to learn about the environment, I'm all in. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
I love it. Elaine, would you like to go next?
Yes, I'm here to find headphones. My name is Elaine, and I teach K.
Nope, I think you muted yourself.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I teach K through 8 at the California Science Center. So no DJ through our USC days and a lot of other things. So happy to be here.
Me too. Me too. Brooke, would you like to go next?
Yeah, my name is Brooke. I am actually a pre-service teacher through USC, and I am teaching high school chemistry in Downey, California. And I also teach the after-school program with DJ called Wonder Kids. We have a grand old time there. Excited to be here.
Yeah, we do. All right, let's see. Hope I didn't go too far. Nope. All right, Kyla, would you like to put, we do have a very quick pretest that we would like all of you to take. Kyla is going to put it in the chat for you. And we are going to set this fancy embedded timer over here to a timer once it's all in there.
All right, I sent it in the chat, so hopefully it works. Let me know if not, if you have trouble with it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna set the timer and you have 5 minutes.
We need permission to view it.
You need to open up the permissions, otherwise we can't open it.
Oh, it might be set to a USC email because I could open it.
Oh no. Oh yeah, it's restricted to Southern Health USC. Okay, so try it now, or I'll send another link in the chat as well. Let's see.
We're good now.
No,
Okay.
it works. Thank you.
Sorry, y'all.
Share your screen so they can see the timer.
What?
You want to share your screen so they can see the timer?
Oh, am I no longer sharing?
No.
Yeah, feel free to let us know in the chat if you're done earlier than the timer, or if you need more time.
Right,
What
was that?
The timer went off, didn't it?
It did. And then I tried to say something that was on mute. We have theory responses. So does anyone else need more time, or we'll just move on? Maybe can be submitted later.
Did you want to share for the next one?
What's the next one? Oh, yes. All right, let me share my screen. And then move the people. Let's see. And then turn on my closed captioning for people who need it. Okay, so lesson one we're going to do today is learning about the greenhouse effect, which I just had in the pre-test. So there's some knowledge about it, but we're going to go delve into it a little bit more now. Oops. We have an experiment that we're going to demonstrate for you today. It's pretty simple. It's something that can be done easily at home or in classroom, given like some cups, which are easily accessible, and then some thermometers that are pretty inexpensive and cheap to buy. So this is an activity that's supposed to simulate 3 different kinds of atmospheres and measuring the greenhouse effect of that. So I'm not going to tell you too much. We're going to put student thinking caps on to think about like what kind of these atmospheres might represent by the different cups. So we'll get into that later. So I guess, yes. So everyone put on their student thinking caps, and does anyone have any predictions about why there might be differences between these cups, or if there will be differences in temperature? So we're going to set up these simulations and then measure temperatures. So does anybody have any ideas about what this experiment might be trying to show us? You can either drop it in the chat or say it out loud as well. I can't see the chat or anything, DJ, so if you want to.
Yeah, I'll keep track of it. There's not something in there at the moment.
Okay.
I think the thermometer.
Kids really love sneer, I've heard.
Is there some?
There's also online
somewhere?
like if you're
Elaine is trying to talk.
But we're coming toward the end, so I can tell you a little bit more about that.
I think the question you're asking us is why is there a difference between the two?
Yes, between the three different conditions.
Well, they're different material, right? One is glass and one is plastic.
Mhm.
Widely, having a lot of,
Like this is glass and this is the bigger one or the higher one. It's glass and the other one's plastic. I honestly think that's why. But
No, you are on the right track. There is definitely a difference in material. Is there any guesses as to why the material might cause difference? Or if not yet, then we'll go over that, but just any predictions?
It is important to teach some words deeply and well, but simply by reading, kids will learn a ton of words. So colleagues,
also there's still noise occurring. Is anyone unmuted? Okay, it stopped. Sorry about that. Yeah, so there's differences in the material. These materials have different properties that we'll talk about later that might affect the temperature inside. So I am going to set up this experiment. I'm gonna go outside and demonstrate it for us. So I'm gonna turn my camera off real quick while we do that and let DJ take over for a minute.
We also have some inputs in the chat from different people. So we have Libby said the effect of greenhouse gases on Earth's temperature. Elaine said, I was going to say that the thermometer with no container over it is going to be cooler than the other two. And then Brooke said that the cups will have a more stable temperature over the day and night cycle rather than the thermometer that is alone. Ooh. Okay, so and then so I heard Miss Wynn talking about what each of the different cups were made out of, and I love some of the guesses and the relationships that we have in here. And this is we tend to do this experiment outside. So if you're able to bring your students out, well, this is also assuming y'all are in person, but potentially bringing it out into your backyard. And seeing there's lots of ways that you could extrapolate from this particular experiment as well. You could, like, similar to what Brooke is saying, you could do like looking at how temperature changes throughout the day and throughout different levels of sunniness between each of the different cups, seeing what the temperatures are like at night as well.
All right, so I'm gonna share there's in case you are unaware of this option, there's a document camera kind of built into Zoom if you have an iPhone to connect to. So if you share your screen, and then I can do it there's like an iPhone, iPad via AirPlay option. So let me just connect that real quick. And then, so now you can see my phone screen. And then if you use the camera, it's like a document cam. So I can show you, oh, sideways does not work, but you can use it as a document camera for your students and stuff. So it's a nifty function. So this is our setup outside. We have the 3 thermometers, each starting around the same temperature of, what is it reading right now? Oops, that's hard to see. About 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 22, 23 Celsius. So it's not sunny right here in my yard right now, unfortunately, but we're gonna leave this outside and see what the temperature change is for about 20 minutes, I think. So that's the setup, and we'll go back to the presentation real quick, but I'm gonna run back inside, so I'm gonna throw it to DJ first.
There's a wonderful question in the chat from Libby. She asks does it matter what surface it gets put on? Like, does it need to be on dirt? Does it need to be on concrete? Or a lot of your schools, when you are back in session, might be on asphalt. Trying to think of what the California Science Center might have to go outside. Or in your backyard. That's a good point too. Like, what or if you have a backyard. So I think that is a great question. It can definitely make a huge difference impacting what's happening with your data. It'd be a great question for your kids to figure out as well.
Mm-hmm. Ideally, also, it would be a sunny location so that the sun rays are hitting your experimental setup, and there's more of a temperature change potentially as well. So in terms of location, that would be interesting to test as much. I think it would, maybe the surface would, depending on how much heat is in your surface that your objects are on and emitting heat itself. And that's also a great transition into this next slide, I guess, about, so again, we'll have,
Make sure to screen share, sorry.
Oh, I thought, okay, my bad. Okay, so, whoops, nope, not the answers. Okay, so again, we'll have some little discussion about this, so feel free to throw it in the chat or say it out loud again, but can you guys think of any examples of transfer of energy or heat, such as electricity or light, between objects, so going out of one and into another?
We have some responses coming in from the chat. So we have Libby, she said a battery, and Elaine said solar panels.
Great, yeah, so those are definitely good examples of the transfer of electricity from one object to another, and then solar is kind of both heat and electrical energy combined and transferred to the earth. Any examples specifically of heat that anyone can think of? A pan, great, perfect. Yep, so when you have a burner and you're cooking something on the stove, the electricity heats up your stove, and then through conduction, which is like the two objects touching each other, the heat is transferred from the stove burner to your pan to cook your food. So in this example, we're using electrical energy, which is then converted to heat energy, and then also light because we're viewing the hot burner. Well, in this case, maybe not on a gas stove. Well, on a gas stove, you can see that fire. But anyway, so another example is a metal bench in the sun. So when you're out at the park or something and there's a hot bench that's been there baking in the sun all day and you sit on it, it hurts your legs because the energy from the sun, the visible light, heats the bench and then transfers back out to your leg as heat. So this is an example that's, we all know these examples, but putting this in the context of the Earth system, the Earth works in the same way where the sun heats the Earth, as we know, every day, where it gets warmer and such. So the Earth takes in the light energy, and it's released back as infrared light. So infrared light is this different wavelength of light that's not visible like sunlight is or something, but it's kind of transferred as heat energy instead of light. So it's a transformation of energy from light to heat. So this previous graphic showed all the visible light coming in and then all the infrared going out, but that's not quite what happens in the Earth system because we have an atmosphere that interacts with the infrared light in a different way. So the atmosphere is made of greenhouse gases such as CO2. We also have other greenhouse gases in our atmosphere that don't get as much media attention, such as methane, nitrous oxide, and those are not as high in concentration in our atmosphere. but they are more potent, meaning they will trap more infrared light. So yes, these greenhouse gases kind of act like a blanket around the atmosphere to trap the infrared light that is coming into our Earth system. So instead of it all leaving, it kind of stays around the Earth and keeps it warm. So under normal circumstances, when we have infrared light or a normal greenhouse gas atmosphere with relatively lower amounts of CO2, it's important for keeping the Earth system at a constant temperature and such, so we can have life on Earth. Otherwise, it would just be really, really cold, a ball of ice. But with climate change, there is a thicker layer of greenhouse gases around the Earth trapping more and more infrared light, which is making it warm more and negative consequences. So if we go back to our experiment and kind of thinking about the different atmosphere simulations, this the thermometer without any covering on it, it kind of represents an Earth without any atmosphere. So this one we were talking about with the cute little Earth. I'm glad you guys appreciate the graphics I saw in the chat. I think they're adorable too. But so the thermometer without any surrounding atmosphere is just this Earth that, like, the infrared goes right back out. So it'll warm and then kind of just directly cool back off. This glass cup, so glass has this special property that you guys were keyed into, that it definitely has some different property than the plastic. Glass, like CO2, will trap infrared light inside. So when sunlight, this is why it's kind of difficult that there's not sunlight in my yard right now, but when sunlight comes in, it'll get trapped in the glass, and then more heat will be trapped in, or less infrared will be able to leave the glass. The plastic cup is kind of a control variable to show that it's not just the act of a container keeping in the heat, like it's actually the glass, the special property of that. So based on those, can anyone predict what are the temperature distributions gonna be of these cups? Which one's gonna be the warmest? Maybe toss that in the chat. Yay, the glass.
We have 2 guesses for glass. I mean, I don't know. The one without a cup is on, pavement.
Perhaps the pavement's got extra warm.
Ooh, Allie sent a very fancy version of glass with emojis in a private chat. I am definitely putting that in the public chat, Allie, just so you know.
Enthusiastic glass. So yeah, if we look at the predicted results, it's not a huge temperature difference, but enough to make a difference, which, if you think about the Earth, there's a 2-degree change is the limit that kind of scientists want to stop us at, and that's not a huge difference, but it's impactful for the Earth. But anyway, the glass jar is the warmest, and then the plastic cup is a little warmer than the Earth without an atmosphere, because yes, there is a little bit of trapping of heat in the container, but it's really the glass that is trapping the IR radiation. So yes, as I said earlier, it's the greenhouse gases that are providing this insulation around the Earth, and CO2 is the main one, but there are other ones as well. And again, we do need this atmosphere to be there, otherwise the Earth would be frozen and too cold and we would just have no heat at all. But as this graph shows, CO2 in the atmosphere has been rising and rising since the Industrial Revolution, thickening this layer around the Earth, kind of like adding more layers of blankets to keep it too warm and too hot, which is why it's become more problematic. And I saw there was a question in the chat that said, would the type of glass jar make a difference, or color? and then DJ remarked how that's awesome, that's different variables and stuff. So that'd definitely be something interesting to try out with students. I am not sure, I've only tried it with mason jars, but would be a fun experiment to maybe give different students different groups with different colors as well, if like maybe a darker glass will absorb more heat or something. So if you try it out, let us know, we'd be interested.
I think that those are some great extension activities from this. I think Libby's come up with a whole bunch, seeing if the surface that they're on makes a big difference, is seeing how we can change up, like, you know, putting paper underneath versus a metal bench or a wooden bench or asphalt or concrete. There's so many ways that you could change up each of these different variables, or depending on where your students live, if you are doing this virtually, figuring out maybe each of them could be representing different variables as well.
Let's see. So I'm moving a little faster than I intended to. So I guess I'm just gonna, while the experiment's still running, we need to make it, give it a little more time. But are you all familiar with this graph over here, the Keeling curve? Yeah. So just for those who aren't, it's at a research station in Hawaii that measures CO2 daily or continuously. And so it's been measuring since the 1960s. And since then, we can see the large rise in CO2 from then to 2020. I believe the readings that are coming off it now in the past couple of days have been like 415 or 411. But what other patterns do you guys see in this graph? Can anyone else see what they observe and describe?
Could you see, is there a way to zoom in on it a little bit or no?
Maybe if I'm trying. That's minus, that doesn't make sense. We will temporarily make it bigger. There we go. So is it a straight line, or does it vary, have a little variation? Is it only up and up and up, or maybe not?
It levels out sometimes. Very nice.
Yeah, we can see my mouse disappeared. There it is.
So Ellie, are you saying that as like the black line that's going from 1960 to 20? Can you explain your answer a little bit?
I was looking like right after 1990. It kind of flattens a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. And then Brooke, can you tell me what you mean by the going up and down of the red line and what you think that is?
So I think the red line is like their actual data. That's like their recorded data. So that's like by year of like it goes up and down, like there's a pattern there. But then the black line is like the overall trend over, how many years is that? 60? Yeah, I think that's 60 years.
And why do you think it'd be going up and down? Like what things would change? What would cause it to oscillate, to use your fancy science word?
Or the emojis. I like the up and down.
I love Allie's emojis. That was awesome.
Well, like kind of Elaine said, maybe it's seasonal. I don't know. We do have like natural temperature patterns of the earth. So I'm not sure if it's annual or if it's like summer, winter, summer, winter. Okay. Or if it's like 1961, then 1962. I'm not sure.
I was thinking the same thing along the lines of Brooke, like seasonal patterns, weather, possibly.
And why do you think like weather or the seasons would impact the CO2 readings?
Are there any processes that you know?
Possibly like the amount of plants, you know, that are in bloom or in season, like in colder climates, warmer climates, kind of thing. Possibly.
Yeah, I like that. Keep going. So if it's based on potentially plants, like what would they be doing or not doing during these different seasons?
Transposing oxygen.
Very nice. So that is definitely one option. What else? I mean, in terms of data literacy, we could also add, I like how Libby's thinking of maybe adding some like plant photosynthesis charts to this and seeing if these trends are comparable for like both for these seasonalities. So great, you know, data literacy components for your students to check out of like, why is this happening? Like, why do we see seasonal changes of CO2? What is impacting this? And then, you know, as Elaine said, it seems to just be like, it levels out a little bit, but it does tend to just, it's trending up.
Yeah. I believe in the lesson plans there were, what was I going to say? There is a demonstration or a map of how CO2 changes like over the globe in like a time lapse for like a year and stuff. So that might be a good tool to demonstrate to your students this like seasonal fluctuation, and then you can have them think about the plants as well. And then Libby also said could be the population in the area. So that's also a great suggestion or idea as well. Thinking about this on the global scale, if we think there are, so the distribution of the continents is such that most of the like continental mass and therefore humans on the continents are in the northern hemisphere. So do you think there would be a different in like this represents global CO2 overall, kind of an average for everywhere, but do you think there would be differences in different locations perhaps?
Maybe we would actually have more CO2 like in the winter because of like humans are cold and we have to like heat ourselves. So we're using like a lot of energy to like stay warm, and especially not so much in like where we are in Southern California, but like definitely in the rest of the United States, Europe, like Russia, it's super cold.
Yeah, and at the same time, you don't have a lot of usually have plant like because it's leaves that do most of the photosynthesizing, and so you know us non-California people are like the leaves fall off, and you have you know just like you know leafless trees after the fall and stuff like that. Oh yeah, Libby's bringing a great example of also adding ideas of like higher concentrations of people and people being a source of CO2, urban jungle component, lack of green spaces in urban areas. Yeah, makes all a bunch of giant difference. And there's also, and that's a great way to also bring some environmental justice pieces to this as well.
In the winter, do we emit more CO2 when we need to drive and use heaters? Good question. So think about like what produce, like where does CO2 come from, right? It comes from this generation of electricity. So do you think someone make the connection between these two and make a prediction about what the case would be, they think?
Elaine, what do you think? Since you're the one that asked the question.
I was just thinking too, I wasn't thinking about plants initially, but like in the summers we can like walk and bike more places, but in the winters we have to drive. I'm thinking too of non-Californian climates. Like you have to drive and you have to use heaters, which are usually gas powered, which emit a lot more CO2 as well.
definitely. The more fossil fuels you're using, the more that's probably being emitted from your tailpipe, or the more electricity we're generating at a power plant, which ultimately also comes from fossil fuels. So overall CO2 emissions real high to keep us warm and cozy in the winter.
What are some other potential sources of CO2 that we can think about that Kyla hasn't mentioned yet? I like Libby's response. Everyone's on, because of COVID and everyone's at home. So there's probably been some major decreases in CO2 for the lack of driving of everybody. But then electricity use in the homes has probably gone substantially up because of all of the more devices and people like working from home or during the summer using AC. But what are other potential sources of CO2 that come to mind? Okay. Keep that on the back, or did someone unmute? I can't tell.
I think someone joined.
Yes, I saw. Welcome, Dr. Dejana.
Kind of going off what DJ said about COVID and being home and people less driving. They actually did do a study on this early in the pandemic, which was kind of cool. They measured not CO2, they measured ozone, which is kind of a proxy for atmospheric gases. But they found that overall CO2 emissions or ozone did not decrease as much as we thought, like globally. It was very regionally dependent. So they brought up the case of Los Angeles, where we are very much a driving city and use cars all the time. But when COVID started and quarantine began and there were less people who were driving, the ozone did decrease. Specifically for us, but maybe not necessarily in other cases where driving wasn't like as drastically changed. But the decrease in LA was also offset by the fact that we have the port of LA and lots of like shipping and stuff there. So there's lots of factors at play here. Also, someone in the chat put in deforestation with populations taking over green space. So that is a great contributor to CO2. We always hear about the rainforests being deforested, which is unfortunate for biodiversity and lots of other reasons, but then also we're losing this great resource of photosynthesis and taking away the ability of the plants to take in all the CO2 we're producing. All right, maybe should I go check on our experiment, TJ?
I think that'd be great.
All righty, so I'm gonna go transfer myself outside real quick.
Yeah, so I know some of you out and are just joining us. You might be wondering, what experiment is Kyla talking about? So we have 3 setups out in her backyard area with thermometers. And so there is a thermometer on a surface. It's just, there's nothing on top of it. There's a thermometer with a plastic cup on top. And then there's a thermometer with a glass mason jar on top. And we are trying to see what the varying temperatures will be for each of those thermometers. And also based on that, seeing how they correspond to like different types of Earths and Earth atmospheres and what they represent by the temperatures changing inside. And then I see Allie, another few sources of potential CO2 in the chat. She put agriculture and food waste. Very true, very true.
Sorry for the delay. We're having my computer updated this morning and it's like doing weird things with the mouse, but we're figuring it out. It's okay. So let me share my phone screen through the document cam again. Cool. So we have 3 things again. So let's check out the temperature of this one. It's approximately, go with, I'm trying to tilt it. So it's about 22 degrees Celsius. Go with Celsius. And the one in the cup is, ooh, that's not correct. It is not 4 degrees Celsius today. So this is a little flaw in our experiment today, but that's okay. We can go with our results that we have in the PowerPoint since those are a little more accurate. Malfunctioning temperature. And then this one is reading a little bit warmer at, let's see, maybe 24 degrees. So ultimately, the
Wait,
one that,
can you say that again? So mason jar was 24. What was the regular one, or without any cup?
was 22.
And then there was our
we have some equipment failure with this one.
What did that one read? You said 4 degrees Celsius?
Yeah, like 4 degrees Celsius, and it's definitely not that cold here in Los Angeles.
Okay, okay. I agree. We're listening, Libby. Welcome to the world of distance learning. We're going with the flow.
For real.
I love it. Okay, and I recorded your temperatures in the chat.
Awesome. So, did this match our prediction? We're seeing what we want to see. Yeah, so ideally the plastic cup would probably be reading like 23 or something, a little in between. And so it did work even without direct sunlight. So that's exciting because there's still light energy out here, obviously. So getting trapped in there, warming up, trapping it a little bit. Probably be a little more dramatic of a difference if we did have sunlight shining on it instead. So again, that'd be cool to try with your students to see if there's large differences depending on where you put it. maybe someone was drinking an iced coffee before, so it was still collecting the cold in there, as Libby suggested. Yeah, so this is a fun little experiment that I think is pretty easy and good for students that demonstrates our concept well. So I'm gonna pop back inside real quick.
And so I loved how Libby was thinking about potential changes to this experiment already besides a non-busted thermometer. And so she had mentioned maybe changing the surface or the color of cups. What are some other variables that you think you can add to this experiment to, like, because students are going to come up with all sorts of different questions. So how else can we explore similar phenomena but with different variables? What are some things that come to your mind? Ooh, what types of plastic are you thinking about, Elaine?
Like, when you would go to like restaurants in person and there were like hard plastic cups, those ones, or like what if it wasn't clear, like a red Solo cup?
I like it.
And then finding equivalents with glass, I guess, too.
Nice. Okay, so we have varying types of plastic cups with different textures and different colors to see if those have an impact. What else?
Is anybody familiar with the albedo effect and can think about how that might play into things?
They're slightly touching upon it, I think, with their mention of changing up the colors.
Yeah, I'm kind of hinting towards that. If anyone has any more ideas.
Ooh. I like Allie's suggestion too. She put in artificial light, seeing how if there's a difference in temperatures for artificial light versus sunlight.
Yeah, if you have like a heat lamp or like an LED or something else.
I wonder if you could like wrap them with like black paper and white paper, like something like that too.
Ooh, I like that too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you wear dark colors, the absorption of different lights, very nice. So maybe changing up the surface colors as well. So changing up the surfaces, changing up the types of cups, messing with the various light forms as well. Y'all are so creative. I love what's coming in on the chat. Even a fan blowing on it. Ooh.
That's an interesting one.
And so see, there's many ways that this one very small, simple experiment could go on for weeks. And you can cover a lot of different content with your students as well. So I mean, we've talked a little bit about the connections that this has to climate, but there's also, you know, material science is in here as well. You know, Elaine brought up all of those different examples of cups. That is definitely some fun material science, and that's a second grade standard right there. You know, we have artificial light. We have, you know, if we add some plants in there, you know, what if we have a plant growing in the jar, like Libby's suggestion, or the presence of water? Both of those are, you know, upper elementary standards looking at photosynthesis as well, like photosynthesis and CO2 rates. So I like the suggestion of adding plants. It's awesome. All right. Are there any questions for what we've done so far? Not yet.
I feel like people have been good at asking questions throughout, but definitely good to take a pause and let us know if you have anything. But
we have a thumbs up from Libby. Okay. I just thought I'd open up the space for a little bit, see if you all wanted to ask any questions. And then I think we, Allie and Elaine, did you want to introduce yourself to the group? I see some potential new faces as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Elaine Bernal. I teach chemistry at Cal State Long Beach. I met DJ, oh my gosh, City of STEM, which year? So yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having this. This is great. Thank you.
And then Allie, do you want me to read it or do you want to introduce yourself? I think I can read it. She says, I'm a wetland educator in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and a nonprofit called the Little River Wetlands Project. How cool. Well, welcome you all.
alrighty, so we're a little ahead of schedule. Do we want the break now, or do we want to keep moving on, or what do you think, DJ and others?
Yeah, let's do the break now.
Okay, so we're just gonna take a little 5-minute break, bio break, get some more coffee, get some more water. I'll set a little timer just so we can all keep ourselves on track.
Okay. Yeah.
Let me find where it is.
So we're back at 10:05.
Yeah, let's do 10:05. That works.
Thank you.
Did you see the video I sent you? Not like I don't think we could show it because I don't think I have forms for those kids. But that was them doing it. But the first one I tried, it was like dirt. You use like wet dirt, but it didn't work that good. So we switched it.
You should explain your experiment setup to the group when we come back from break. I think they'd really enjoy what you had done.
Okay. It was quite a task with the lights. Those are like construction lights that my dad happened to have, and I hauled them to school. But yeah, all right, I'm gonna go take a little lap around my house.
Especially inspired from our fitness session yesterday.
Some jump squats.
Yep.
All right, I'll be back.
Oh, I was kind of expecting the timer to go off. Did it not have music or something?
I'm muted, that's why. It did go off and I was like, I have to stop it. But I guess nobody else heard it, but yeah, lovely Popey siren timer, I guess. But yeah, so welcome back everyone to
Can you let us know in the chat if you're back?
Yeah, hard to tell.
Okay, so Brooke and Miss Wynn, they're back.
Let's see, let me open up some lessons.
Elaine, Allie, other Elaine. There's 2 Elaines here today.
Is that
all right?
Is that everyone? We good to move on? All right, let's do it. So our next lesson, more about CO2, is we're going to talk about the sensors and how we might collect data. So we just talked about the global scale CO2, where the Keeling curve represents kind of CO2 levels everywhere for the whole Earth. Everyone kind of uses that as a standard. But we kind of started touching on this in our little discussions about CO2 on the local scale. So we're going to scale it down to our communities and our schools and what might be impacting CO2 there. So we talked about this briefly, but feel free again to kind of just either say out loud or throw in the chat something like, what do you know about CO2 impacts or sources on the local scale?
Can you move it to the next slide? You're still on the timer.
Am I?
Yeah, we're seeing the slide deck with the timer on it.
Still not seeing it.
Maybe stop sharing and reshare.
Stop sharing. Oh, it said it was paused for some reason. My apologies. Let's see. Share screen. Now, can you see it?
Yep.
Okay, so instead of going to this first question, I guess, well, no, let's talk about a little more, maybe just a couple of things about CO2 and the local scale to reiterate. Like, what do you think of when you think of CO2 on a smaller local scale? Chat. Automobile exhaust, that's a great one, a very direct, right there when you're in your car, very local. Kind of as I talked about in LA, CO2 emissions. Any other local sources? Great, oil refineries. That's where we're getting our greenhouse or our fossil fuels that producing the greenhouse gases. Agriculture, Port of LA or other seaports and such.
What about them? What about them are making CO2? Gonna put you on the spot, Elaine.
All the trucks and the cargo ships emit CO2.
Okay. And then the other Elaine, can you explain your answer as well?
Yeah, so I grew up in Carson, not too far away. And we have like major refineries there. So we have BP's there and Tesoro, Marathon Oil. And then there's a lot of community folks that are doing work around trying to, get the refineries to clean up. So lots of CO2 coming from there and other wonderful chemicals. There you go.
Thank you. That both Elaine's.
What about Allie with the answer for agriculture? Could you expand on that?
I think she would probably end up writing it in the chat.
Right.
But I look forward to Allie's answer in there.
Yeah. And then,
to be honest, I've seen a difference just even working in schools that are in, that are 100% asphalt on the playground to a school I'm currently at, that a good half of the school is grass. So you can even just tell the difference, the CO2 in that presence. Like the kids are more aware of it. In an urban, my students in an urban area, or if you ask the same question, they're like, but kids that are in more, and I'll say it, affluent areas sometimes, are more aware to it as well.
Definitely, yeah, the green spaces definitely could impact CO2, as we talked about, photosynthesis and stuff. Yeah, so that's a good one. And then Allie said the methane coming from cows, and then but which is totally right. And also, although I was asking CO2, like kind of we want to keep in the back of our minds, like through this whole presentation, that like CO2 is not the only greenhouse gas. There are other ones that are more that are like important. CO2 obviously gets a lot more attention. It's more tangible for people to think about, but methane, as I said before, is a lesser component in the atmosphere, but it's more potent. And what I mean by that is that it like, you can kind of think of it as like CO2 is like this thin layer, one molecule, and then methane will be like a thicker layer. So for every one molecule of methane, it'll trap more heat in the atmosphere. So there's less of it, but it has a big impact, if that makes sense.
Brooke also has a fun fact to share.
So for undergrad, I went to UC Davis. So there's a bunch of research about cows and climate change and methane. And so the majority of methane doesn't actually come from cow poop. It comes from cow burps, because the way that they digest their food, the methane actually comes back out through their mouth. So they're actually doing a ton of research on like changing cattle feed to reduce methane in their gut. And one thing that they're looking into is actually seaweed. Seaweed helps like reduce methane, seaweed. And so weird fun fact.
That's awesome. I bet that kind of has like a double impact as well, if they're growing seaweed and like that's taking in more CO2 and then reducing the CO2 output by cows. So whole great system all around.
I love it. What did you learn today? Cow burps.
Cow burps. My mind was blown when I learned that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good to know.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So we kind of touched on this a little bit already with talking about green spaces in schools, but can you guys think about how you might be able to, we also talked about the experiment of using the glass jars and stuff, but like what kind of other ways do you think you could use CO2, work with CO2 in your school, or how you see yourself using CO2 data for your students?
And so since we're thinking very, very hyper local as well, what are, I know that a lot of you mentioned CO2 sources that might be coming from like the cities that you're in, or even, I mean, agriculture is huge, but that spans almost like counties and different places. But what are some CO2 sources that you might find at your school or the science center, or like what are you thinking about in terms of CO2 at your school? Like what at your school either produces CO2 or is affected by CO2? So Libby, can you explain what you mean by, you said how to improve the processes around the school to reduce the use of CO2, but where is
First, like, and this I would be, for my kids, I would have them have fun, like looking into what produces CO2, kind of what you just had us do, and then equate it to the things that they use, like if it's the styrofoam lunch trays, the different things, like how could they then reduce the use of those that would, you know, in the production of create CO2. So then it's like, okay, so what can we do in the classroom? What different things can we use? Are we using recyclable things? Are we using reusable things? You know, different things like that too. So they not only associate CO2 as, oh, it's a gas, but now where that gas comes from. If that makes better sense.
No, I like it. Very nice. And then Elaine, can you explain what you mean by like traffic around your school?
Mute. Okay. Yeah. So one of the streets near, like right where campus is 7th Street, and then the 22 freeway, the entrance and exit is near there. So there's always traffic, and it's near the VA hospital. So yeah, there's just constant traffic there. I was thinking about the turnaround on campus too, but nobody's really on campus right now. But that would have been a really good source to test for CO2 because cars are always idling.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Allie added to that as well. She said all of the cars that are idling during kid pickup and drop off. And I think that's what Brooke was getting at too, with the parking lot before and after school.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, during the normal school year, right? Lots of idling. Yeah.
Very true. Very true. And I also like Elaine Krebs's suggestion for more energy efficient lighting. I think that goes with what Libby said too about like more sustainability focused initiatives for your school or informal science center site. So seeing, because electricity production is also a huge way to make CO2 as well, is how much electricity you're using, and brought up the great example of the AC and the heater. And those are both examples of, you know, what you can do either in your home or in your school in terms of using or not using ACs, heaters, or electricity. I'm very jealous of Allie. They have a hoop house that is filled with tons of native plants for restoration. That's amazing.
Starting the compost for food waste, that's also excellent, right? That's because food waste is definitely contributes to CO2 production as well, and emissions, and also as what you choose to eat, like your dietary preferences can also affect CO2. Kind of going back to cow burps, if you eat a lot of cows, you're gonna farm more cows and more cows are gonna burp, so there'll be more CO2 or methane in the atmosphere. Eat more seaweed, I guess. Let's see.
Allie had a great question that I think leads well into your next last question and slide.
Sure, yeah. So I heart cow burps. I love it. So I think someone else also suggested somewhere kind of related to the last question, what are CO2 sources? Oh, that was DJ asking CO2 sources at your school, which is basically what we're talking about. So for measuring the CO2 sources at our schools or in different locations, like CO2 absorption in a wetland, I'm not aware, I'm sure there are ways to measure CO2 absorption by the plants specifically. That would be super interesting to look at. But so what we've come up with, I'll transition to my next slide, is measure. So for our idea of measuring CO2 in schools, we have CO2 sensors. So they're these little Arduino, I think is what we call them, CO2 sensors that you can build. These guys cost approximately $200 and require some assembly. But I have some so it's a little expensive, but definitely doable, and I put them together myself. So if I can learn some engineering to build these CO2 sensors, anything's possible. And it just, I have this, I'm trying to pull up the slide deck for it, but we have this resource that I've generated of how to build a CO2 sensor. So it requires all these little parts, like the little mounting plate and the sensor itself and the breadboard, which is like kind of the electrical components. And it goes through the tools you need, such as a little soldering work, which can be a little challenging, but I learned it and I will provide great instructions on how to assemble this. But yeah, so we have this resource. If you have the resources to purchase one, we're also planning on giving, the original idea of this grant or this program was to give some of these CO2 sensors. We had money to purchase them and build them from the NAAEE workshop.
Schools.
Yeah, and for our partner schools, and measure CO2 in the school. So I have one here in my home as well. It might be hard to grab, it's a little finicky, but it's actively measuring CO2. Let me see if I can share my screen again, even though I'm having a little trouble with it.
Yeah, so they're Arduino CO2 sensors. So there's a little bit of electronics work there for older kids, because I know some of you work, like Elaine and Brooke, you work with you both work with high school, and then Elaine Krebs, you work with all ages. And so like the coding and the soldering might be for older students that are more comfortable with that. But the use of just collecting CO2 data, I think, could work well for the younger students. We currently have 7 of them, and those are going into each of our partner schools. And we do, the project was set up to have students be collecting this information and then create a greenification project of their choosing at their school site, and seeing if their greenification project had an impact on the CO2 sensors. And so all the schools are closed. So that made parts of this project very difficult, which is why we transitioned into doing this teacher PD. But like the main set of skills that you do need for this are like Kyla said, so soldering, which is melting some metal with like hot sticky thingy, and merging some of the electronics together and coding it. But we in the PowerPoint that Kyla has put together, she does a walkthrough of how to do each of those steps. And we've also itemized the materials list. So for those of you that might want to be able to purchase and put this together, for as sensors go, $200 is not terribly expensive, but they're supposed to be set up as like a one area type of sensor. So one for a site should be okay. And then can you tell us a little bit more about what we're looking at right now, Kyla?
So this is a CO2 sensor in my bedroom because we're all working from home. It's reading 1,133 ppm right now, which is way too high. But I think it's because it was reading a little bit normal levels before, but I think I moved it around a little bit, so it was being a little finicky. But basically, we have a setup where this part right here is the CO2 sensor itself that is taking the readings. And then we have this nice little display screen and all the electrical components hooked up. So it's a nifty little thing that is small and portable to take into classrooms and such.
Sorry, I was being facetious. I said, were you breathing on it?
I know, well, my window is usually open and I closed it today, so there's no construction noise for you all to hear. So I'm wondering, maybe I'm just like breathing and it's concentrating on the sensor too much today. And I turned off my air purifier. I'm not sure that would really affect CO2 levels, but we're thinking of ideas.
Yeah. I also have mine over here. There's some private chats that are asking if there was any type of flatulence that might have increased the number to tie on to cow burps from earlier. I have mine set up over here as well. And mine's reading, oh, can you all see that? I can't, someone has to say something because I can't actually see you.
We can see it, we can't read it though.
I saw, sorry, I saw 519. I don't know.
Yeah, it
Oh,
looks like
521?
520, okay.
Yeah.
Very nice. Oh no, I touched it.
They are, I will warn you, they are a little finicky, as Kyla had said. So they occasionally need to be calibrated.
or whatever, but pretty simple use when they're all set up and stuff. So let me go back to the presentation. All right, so these are the CO2 sensors that, as we said, yeah. Oh, I just wanted to talk about the units, ppm, that people might be unfamiliar with. So ppm is parts per million, and that's typically what CO2 is recorded in or reported as. And it's easy to think about this, like if you think about a percentage, that's parts per 100. So like 1 out of 100, kind of this little box is just a percentage. But parts per million is 1 part out of a million total parts. So that's just how we measure. Like there are, say, like 400 is ppm is typical concentration for CO2. So there are 400 parts, 400 molecules of CO2 in, let's say like a liter of air or like a parcel of air. So that's how what the units are. I already showed you this, how the assembly and display and stuff, so make it more accessible that you can do it on your own. So again, we've been talking about this a little more, but we'll do it again. This is a poll everywhere for those of you who are familiar with it. So if you go to this link either on your computer or your phone or something, type in just the poll.ev. My name, and type into as many as you can within this 2-minute time period, some sources of CO2, and it's going to generate a word cloud for us, which will be fun. So let me go ahead.
In the chat. Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, let me put it in the chat. Well, the link, I have to activate it first. Sorry. So let me stop sharing my screen though. Let's see, chat is, sorry, I had this pulled up, but then there were technical difficulties. But yes, poll EV.
As Libby would say, welcome to distance learning.
It's my first time teaching distance from home, so. Oh, I sent it to DJ privately again.
It's okay, you're not the only one.
I teach my students my favorite F word, which is called flexible.
I love it. Let me just activate this poll real quick. Okay, so it should be active. So go ahead and put in as many as you can. If there's repeated ones, that's okay, because that's the whole point of word cloud. It'll have bigger words for like ones that repeated. So
do we submit like a bunch of answers or just type them all and then hit submit once?
I think
If you type submit, it'll like give you a new box. You like type a word,
Okay.
submit, type another word, submit. You can like just keep going.
So I'm just going to set a 2-minute timer. I would be like the dancing pirates. Pirates. Awesome. So toss in your last few answers. And I'm gonna go ahead and copy over the word cloud so that everyone can see it. Let's see.
Does it look awesome?
All right. Clipboard. There we go. All right. So everyone can see my screen, hopefully still. I'm just make it full screen again. So clearly cars was the #1 answer that everyone said, which is to be expected since it's the biggest one. We got some fossil fuels, refineries, deforestation, cows, of course, and burping came up, which is an important source. Metabolism, truck driving, agriculture. So these are, yes, all great sources of CO2, which we've talked about before, but I kind of want to put it in the context as this lesson, we're talking about going from the global scale to the local scale. So next, I want you to, on Zoom, I think on your toolbar, there's a place to click on annotate. So DJ, do you know how to, I can't find my toolbar. So do you want to help explain?
Yeah, it's under view options at the top where it says screening and hitting annotate on Zoom.
Cool. So with this option, you'll be able to like draw on the screen that I'm sharing for everyone to see. And I want everyone to like take a couple minutes and think about which of these sources are more local and like impacting CO2s like on a smaller local scale, and which ones are more global. So with the star stamp, I want that to be local, and then for the global sources, make it the exclamation point. Or maybe actually the heart would be easier to see. So heart for global, star for local. I like the little AC showed up inside the cars. No. The AC in your cars, perhaps. We'll give it a little more time to throw in a last few answers in there. Nobody's hit animals or transportation or humans over there on the left yet. Respiration.
New cement's a good one.
That is a great one. All right, so we can kind of start discussing some of these. So first I want to talk about cars, some of the contentious ones that have both stars and hearts. So someone from the star group, can you explain to me what you think makes it local?
I put local because you kind of said before, LA is like very much a driving city, and the public transport is working on it, but I don't know, just based on where we all live and work,
Yeah.
affordability, we all end up driving. So
I think like in a city like Los Angeles, it is a commuting city. So and I think it's dependent on where your perspective is on cars. But I put both. Cars on a global scale, it's also then you're talking about places like China and India and other uses where cars and car usage has gone up.
Totally. So yeah, you're getting at exactly what I was thinking there. So do you think if we measured CO2 in Los Angeles or China or something, and then measured CO2 somewhere in, I don't know, I'm from like Connecticut, where there's like kind of farm country, middle of nowhere, it's very rural. So do you think there'd be like different CO2 concentrations measured between these two locations? Yeah, some thumbs up for yes. Because totally right. It is both answers are right, where it is a local problem or concern where there's more CO2 being emitted, where there are lots more cars, but then overall it kind of is occurring globally and contributing to CO2 in the atmosphere anyway. So eventually all the CO2 emitted from the cars will like dissipate into the atmosphere and just kind of dilute out and such. Let's see. So that's kind of also with the exhaust one. Let's talk about.
I like Elaine's comments in the chat. I think that there are CO2 differences between driving cities like Los Angeles and public transit cities like Japan.
Totally. Yeah, there's like lots of different facets impacting CO2 in one location as well. And the more public transit we have, the less cars, the less CO2, hopefully. So great way to combat climate change and CO2 emissions locally. I like Elaine's comment also about even between like different areas in like LA County where like Long Beach, can you explain why there's less CO2 in like East Long Beach than West and North? Is this because of refineries or?
Yeah, so the refineries are closer to, actually they're like right next to West and North Long Beach. And then you have the 710 going up just along West Side and North Long Beach. So you have a lot of diesel trucks coming from the port, and then also industrial area, like manufacturing companies. So yeah, and then we don't have, there's not any of that in the east side of Long Beach, which is mostly residential parks, a lot of green space. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So these like, this is like these refineries and factories and stuff are what we call like direct outputs of CO2. So like that's you can like name the source directly and measure it there. While if you're measuring CO2 in the atmosphere, like in general, like the Keeling curve at Mauna Loa in Hawaii, that's kind of just like measuring the impacts of everything, not just like, or it's a proxy for it instead of local.
Yeah, I like Elaine's like the idea of that local like Long Beach aspect, because like aspects of that could if you're familiar with how to do some like either drone stuff or like ArcGIS things, you could make a story map of where some of these sources are, and having students like map where they think CO2 like sources are in their local area, and then that could easily be tied to like an environmental justice project as well, of seeing like where are the communities that live around these sources, who lives where, who are they, and what can be done about some of those impacts that are affecting the community as well. So thank you for bringing that up, that example of Elaine.
Definitely.
Libby added, I think it's a question. She says, I think of a location of Long Beach to the ocean. What do you mean by that, Libby?
That also parts of Long Beach like may be more affected, like North Long Beach, closer to the freeway, 710. I live along the 710, so I totally understand Elaine's comments with the trucking, that because of the trucking corridor. That makes it fun for when I try to travel to work. But also then you kind of has that same idea as when you go drive up into the mountains and you feel like you're into fresh air finally. I think the same idea too is like in Long Beach, you can go towards the ocean and it feels, cooler and fresher, in the air sense. Like, our lungs sometimes I think can tell too. Yes, lady.
I think the yes lady was to her dog.
Yes, she's trying to eat. She's trying to eat my snacks.
Very nice. Go ahead, Kyla.
I love all these ideas in the like relation to the very local scale of LA, and also like how we're talking about how there's like different, like very small scale differences. I want to talk about also, someone said clothing on the word thing. Does someone want to explain what they first meant by like the CO2 emissions from the clothing, and then maybe next, or someone else can do the global hearts on it. But first, what do you mean by clothing? Anyone else talk about who put it?
I didn't put it, but I put a heart on it because then when I saw it, it made me think of it. Oh yeah, but like what Libby's saying, like the global production. So like you have like fast fashion, right? So you have like literally the harvesting of the materials to like make that clothing isn't particularly ethical. And then like the places it goes to like be made, like you have a whole like justice issue there with like equal pay and like sweatshops and all of that stuff. But then like, yeah, you have the CO2 directly from like the agriculture of farming those materials to make the clothing, and then like the actual like production facilities themselves like have CO2, and then the shipping of clothing globally. So it's like a whole supply chain where there's at every step there's CO2 production, and it is being moved around the world. Like they'll grow cotton in a specific place, and then they'll ship the cotton thousands of miles away to be made into clothing, and then in like, for example, like Bangladesh, and then they'll ship those clothes back to the United States. So that just those little cotton bits.
Brooke explained my idea perfectly.
Yeah, that was a great explanation. Thank you.
Polymers. Totally forgot about that.
Right. So I'm going to move on from this. So this is awesome. We can see here that there's like lots of different global sources, local, sometimes they overlap, and lots of things impact CO2. So kind of the takeaway here. Oh no, the annotations are still there.
I took a screenshot so we can how do we take them off? Actually?
If you go to annotate, whoever the host is can go up to their annotate and clear all.
Annotate, clear.
Magic.
Wow. Okay. Let me stop.
Maybe you are so Zoom fit like expert. I love it.
Every day from 8 to noon.
So the takeaway from this, that hopefully that you guys have been very clued into, it seems, is where you measure CO2 matters, whether it's going to be LA or Connecticut, or East Long Beach versus West Long Beach. So we're going to take this and think about this as we move into our next activity, which we're going to separate you out into 2 breakout groups, perhaps? Or should we just do this as one group, big group, DJ? What do you think?
Yeah, we can ask them, do you all want to do it in the main room, or do you want some time away from us?
Okay, we won't be offended.
All right. One of the Elaines says one group is fine. All right, we have 2 votes for one group. All right, that's good enough.
So in this group, I want you all to discuss, well, we kind of already discussed one, so maybe let's not spend so much time on that one, because we know we did just talk about that. But so focus more on 2, what might be impacting CO2 concentration in your school, different locations or overall. And then for number 3, if let's say hypothetically you had two CO2 sensors in your school and you wanted to place that, you were trying to think about where am I going to place them that'll be impactful and like collect meaningful data for my students. So think of an experiment of 2 locations where you'd place those CO2 sensors and what you might expect to see from that. So I'm going to send you guys a link to the presentation in the chat, because the idea was to have someone like write the answers on the next slide if we were to do breakout groups and such. So maybe I'll just have maybe someone can be the designated slide editor. So here's the link to the presentation. Let me make sure it's editable.
I think you sent it to me privately.
Ah.
I know you love me, but you might want to send it to everyone.
Hey, you're involved. You get to lead the discussion. No, yeah. So if someone wants to edit the slides and kind of add it in on slide number 27 is where we have like answers to the prompts, but I'm going to delete this first one. And then anyone with the links should be able to edit it. So I'm going to set this timer and you guys can discuss for 7 minutes and then we'll talk about it.
You can also discuss it out loud if you'd like. Or would you prefer to just do it on here and keep it silent? Also trying to see what the group is comfortable with as well.
By experiment, do you mean the location of the sensors? Okay. Cool.
Ooh, I like the person putting it at like cafeteria versus playground. Ooh, I like that. A workout room versus a regular classroom. Ooh.
I was thinking like they have like the weight room at the high school where people are like, it's a enclosed space because they have football.
Oh yeah, sorry. I think that was like so much. So I was like, what school, what elementary school has a weight room?
No. Like for high school, like the conditioning spaces where you have like a lot of people exercising, like breathing really heavily in an enclosed space. And a lot of times they'll like close the door and windows to make it hotter. Because if you sweat more, get more stuff out. I don't know. I don't understand their logic. I'm not a sports ball person.
Sports ball. It'd be interesting to do like, so one of the buildings in campus as opposed to one of the buildings, you know, like closer to the street. So that'd be interesting to do.
Can you repeat that? Sorry, my dog also went crazy.
I was like, dog. Yeah, so like maybe putting a sensor in one of the central buildings, so like right inside campus, as opposed to like a building that's facing the street. So that would be, yeah, because it's a pretty big campus. So I'd be interested to see what the difference is.
We're at a college campus during a normal time too. You've the community space, like the lunch spaces and all the food, you know, where more concentration of students, student union building type thing, versus like an individual classroom that may not get used as often.
Interesting. How about you, Miss Wynn? Because you know you're getting one. So where would you want to put a sensor in Norwood?
I don't know. The main building?
Very true. Normally there's going to be a lot of traffic there too.
Yeah, the main building.
Okay. And if you got a second one, what would you want to compare?
To the NPR, which is not used as much.
Ooh, okay. Very nice.
But I think one of the suggestion was like, is there like a case covering? Because I can see the kid touching it.
I would touch it. Yeah, I was like,
I mean, just the way the device is set up, like curiosity, you know.
I think that we might need to spend a little bit of the grant to get some case coverings.
Because it's gonna fall apart if I keep touching it. Just saying.
That is very true. That is very true. And the ones I have seen mounted do have a case covering. So we'll definitely need to think about that and protect them accordingly.
Yeah, well, I'm in the main building this year.
Very nice.
I wonder if the height, I wonder if like our school is not getting one, but if the placement of it matters too, like if it's at child heights or if it's up towards the ceiling, you know, versus on the floor, that kind of thing. And this is the dog that's been attacking me. So you can also know why she is a puppy.
Putting a name to the face. She's adorable.
Okay, I'm adding the child versus adult height to the experiment slide. I also added main building versus NPR for you, Miss Wynn.
Thank you.
Yeah, those are all some really interesting ideas that, as we talk about, would potentially see. Can someone elaborate on some of them, maybe like why they might think there are CO2 differences between these two locations? Like main building versus the other one.
Well, the other one is not used as often. It's like kind of like where we held assembly, but there's really no assembly right now. And it's just kind of like a space for like, I guess when there's like events where you need a bigger space, because we don't do it outdoors anymore. We used to.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why. And the main building is where parents come in at all time of day to either pick up their child, pick up materials or whatnot.
So you're saying more like the impact.
High flow area. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Heavy breathing, lots of air, CO2 coming out.
Yeah, and also the AC and you know all the buildings there would be using some kind of electricity versus the NPR usually doesn't really have things. It's not really on unless you go in there and turn it on.
So that's an interesting point. Do you think that, so is electricity a global or a local sort CO2 emitter?
Well, I think it's kind of a combination of both, because in-house, like single house usage versus like if you live by yourself, you wouldn't use as much electricity hoping. But like if you live with like a lot of people and they're using different things or different devices, that's going to generate a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in the classroom, like I personally don't always turn on the AC personally, but I know a lot of teachers, you know, like when it comes like 70 something, their AC is on. I don't like to turn it on. I turn on the heater a lot though. so I don't know, maybe in that essence, we're probably using the same amount of stuff. So that's just how I see it.
Yeah, no, definitely. So those definitely use CO2. But if the emission, if we think about where the electricity comes from, ultimately it's the power plant, right? So if the CO2 is generated at the power plant, do you think you'd see a difference at the school directly?
Not majorly, no. Unless we're very close to the power plant.
Right, exactly. So definitely like a great point to bring up with students that electricity impacts CO2, but also good to keep in mind that it might not, I mean, this could also be an experiment with students, it might not affect CO2 at this like fine local scale that you can like is tangible and you can see with the CO2 sensors, but that's like an interesting thing to ask students, like if they think like what things will directly impact CO2 locally versus globally. Yeah, so great ideas to keep in mind as we talk about it in our schools. I'm going to move through these a little bit quicker because we kind of already discussed them and we're running a little bit into time for our next lesson, but we kind of already talked about how CO2 concentrations vary. Like we saw those fluctuations in the Keeling curve, so it varies seasonally. Oops. Oh yes, and this, so nope, we're gonna go with between locations first, which we talked about, city versus rural, or different states, like Connecticut might not emit as much CO2. This graph shows like CO2 emissions per state, and Texas and California are doing real bad. Versus like other ones here are maybe a little greener, maybe there's less people, less things impacting CO2 differently. And then this is also a graphical representation of the CO2 of the states that are emitting the most CO2 and contributing to it. So CO2 varies between locations. It also varies for local events, like as we talked about, number of people in a room, number of people breathing, maybe air circulation. I mentioned that I had my window closed today and the CO2 on my sensor is super high, so maybe that's kind of impacting it. And then also the presence or absence of plants and green spaces.
Is she frozen?
I would be interested in how the California though and Texas being two of the biggest states, you know, when also some of the highest populations because of weather, like how it would be affected more, not necessarily by state, but by, you know, region.
Very true.
So not by state, not by, because that skews the data too when we have almost 40 million people in one state versus New Hampshire, which doesn't have, you know, just because of its size.
Very true. Because the bottom was like DC, which doesn't have a lot of people, but like small area, Delaware, New Hampshire, all those very small populations.
Very true.
I found this map, but it's from 2011, so it's a little old, but kind of flips what you're thinking about. Yeah, like actually some of those smaller states per capita have worse CO2 emissions.
Very true. Well, while we're waiting for Kyla to come back, I think her Wi-Fi went out. Welcome to teaching in 2020. Yeah, no, but I see what you mean about it skewing the data left, Libby, you know, because there are a ton more people in here, but there's also a bunch of ports. There's so much other things that could potentially cause this. And that's a great discussion to have with your students in relation to all of this as well. A different visual of the same thing. And then Kyla, welcome back.
I'm back. I'm on my phone. My Wi-Fi kicked me out, so I apologize for that. But I cannot control any of the slides from my phone, so DJ, you need to help me out. But I'm not sure.
I'm opening it up.
Okay. So did you talk about what this is yet?
Was about to start.
Okay. Okay, so DJ and I have been in lieu of being able to measure CO2 in schools, in our partner schools, like we're going to do with our CO2 sensors, we have been measuring CO2 in our own homes and comparing the two locations to see if there's any differences on this local scale. And we kind of see these little fluctuations every day. CO2 goes up or down, and we've been collecting this data since September, I think, September 1st.
September 1st.
And before I got kicked off, I was talking about local events that affect CO2. And this kind of first spike right after like September 6th is when the fires were happening in LA. And especially near DJ out in Chino, there was huge spikes in CO2. She's like, my CO2 sensor is like off the charts right now. Like it's so much higher. So it's really interesting to see that local events reflected in the data as well. So these are fun because you can ask your students, like, what do you think is impacting the CO2 today? Why might it be higher? What might be affecting it? It's just like these local conditions and such.
Yeah, and so for some of the teachers, like we are hoping to, because we do have a little bit leftover grant money. So obviously all of our schools are getting some, but we're also trying to figure out how we can support the people that showed up today. Because originally we were thinking about sending you at least a whole bunch of thermometers because those are relatively cheap. But since so few people actually came to today's session, we might be able to see if we can get you all a sensor. And then we would love to have each of you create and then like install your sensor where in your school or in your home or wherever, and then be added onto our data collection thing so that we can compare these different sites. So like, how's the Science Center doing today? Or how's Long Beach or CSULB doing? And let's compare that to Norwood, because Norwood, you were getting one to begin with. But or Glendora, and I'm not sure where Jenny is. So
I'm up in rural Gilroy, south of Silicon Valley.
So
by Monterey Bay.
That'd be great to add a rural site.
Yeah, like our greenhouse would be a nice green space away from people that would hopefully be less CO2 once it gets up and going again.
Very true, very true.
DJ, do you want to click on the recording your CO2 template?
Oh, sure. Give me a minute.
So we have these I created this template that you guys can use or like copy over, and if you get CO2 sensors, record your data in these. I think DJ just sent it in the chat. And it basically has a couple different setups where if you have one CO2 sensor, you can input the CO2 every day and it'll auto-populate in a graph, kind of like ours, to show the fluctuations in CO2 per day. And then if you happen to decide to purchase a second sensor, there's a tab to compare it between locations like we have. And this document just kind of has a lot of the instructions on how this is set up and where you can share it. And then if you make this data, like put it in our folder, we have like a citizen science folder where like we can put all the data from every school so that everyone can like compare with each other. And so you can like share the data and graph it and compare it between locations. So we thought this would be fun to give more resources for not just like looking at one within one school, but also between many schools.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
You're good.
Are we getting the sensor soon? Is it going to be mailed to the school?
Well, we wanted to wait till schools were open. So
okay.
They're just in Kyla's apartment.
Okay. I just want to make sure. I was like, I'm not there.
No. We would definitely make sure that anyone receiving this would know that it's happening.
I was like, I don't know. They probably throw it away. It's hard to tell, right?
Yeah, no worries. We will make sure that they are going to the people that we intend to have them.
Okay, just checking. Thank you.
No, that is a great point. I appreciate it. but this is what she was talking about, just some of the templates for some data collection, and then the autofill graphs. And you can add as many variables to this as you want. You can do, time of day, like if you try and be as consistent as you can, because that's definitely causing some of our fluctuations, because we started out doing it real consistently in the mornings, but then, ooh, Kyla, you're on here twice.
I'm back.
But yeah, time of day is also a huge, makes a huge difference. You'll definitely some ebbs and flows on time of day as well. So it depends on how often you would like to collect the CO2 information with your students.
Yeah, so
If we were all comparing, when we all have them in our schools, should we all try to have at least a consistent time for a data point, so we can see, like if we said, recess time at approximately 10 a.m. or whatever recess. Yep. Yeah, my brain automatically goes elementary, but at a consistent-ish time.
Yeah, definitely, because CO2 does fluctuate throughout the day. So if you're controlling for the time of day that you measure, that's scientific practices. So that's like if we all have CO2 sensors, if we know that this resource is not available.
Oh, I think she's having the same problem. Or is it just me?
No, I think she's having the same problem. Oh. All right, can you all still see my screen? Is that
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so we wanted to be able to kind of demonstrate that there are, like, if you aren't able to get a sensor, because we were expecting a giant amount of people, that there are publicly available CO2 data sources that you can also take a look at. And so, I mean, this was the one that we showed earlier with the Keeling curve, and that one's in Hawaii, but there's also ones in California that also record CO2 data as well. So that there are a whole bunch of sources that you can also find other CO2 sources data from. All right, lesson number 3. Hi, Kyla, welcome back.
I'm back just in time for lesson 3, where I've thrown it back to DJ. So at least the internet is like timing.
The internet's like, I'm done. It's DJ's turn. Got it. All right. So, I mean, I think we've asked. I was debating using a Mentimeter for this, but I think we've asked components of this already. Of like you yourself as an individual, like, and maybe just put it in the chat instead. But you as an individual, what types of CO2 do you produce as an individual? And Kyla, if you could facilitate the chat, because I can't see that super well when I share.
Okay, let me pull it up on my phone chat. Driving, that's definitely a action that you specifically do. Car exhaust, so you can choose if you want to commute more or less than before. We have non-green electricity sources, laser cutting from Jennifer. Can you explain that one?
There we go. Yeah, my boyfriend and I have our own business where we do laser cut board game organizers. Silicon Valley is a great area for that. But and we help out our friends, and that's how we get the free laser time. But it's definitely a lot of emissions. We've got a big filter on it, and we figured out how to extend the life of that with diatomaceous earth, but it's still emissions.
That's really neat. That's interesting.
Burning wood with lasers.
Very cool.
We have one over here too, so I feel your laser cutterness.
So a lot of people said driving and electricity, which we already touched on. before. Elaine said eating meat. So could you share that one? Because we haven't talked about that one too much.
Unmute video. Okay. Yeah. So my understanding of the CO2 emissions from at least not the meat itself, but like, you know, producing like meat production. So I think for beef, especially, it's really high. I forget what the numbers are off the top of my head. But I mean, there's like a lot of the land use that goes behind it. And also transporting the meat, right? So there's a lot of like within the production. I'm not exactly where in that production the CO2 emissions are coming from, but I know for sure, like, I mean, my understanding is that with meat production, there's a lot of CO2 emissions.
Yeah, definitely. You're totally right there. The cow burps.
Where are you doing? Where are you?
Yes. And then one other one I want to touch on that a couple of people said is either purchasing things non-locally and then purchasing new versus like secondhand used items. So can either like Brooke or Elaine or someone elaborate on that one as well?
Yeah, just like the fact that if I purchase something from China, right, it has to be flown or come across the ships and driven to the UPS travels, or is it,
Is anyone else having a really hard time hearing her, or is that just me?
I can't really hear you either. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's really quiet. I don't know why.
I think you might be very far away from your microphone.
okay. I switched microphone.
Better.
Okay.
Sorry, say it again, please.
Just the fact that, like, if online ordering is great, but if I purchase something from China, it has to fly over or take a ship and then get driven or fly locally or something. And if I would have purchased the item in California, even, at least, there's just less emissions getting that product to me.
Totally. And someone in the chat mentioned Amazon, which is of course beautifully convenient for us all, but produces so much cardboard and transportation to like give us all these items on demand. So also
Maddie.
a source of emissions. And then yes, Amazon cardboard boxes and such. So those are all great examples of how we like individually can impact CO2.
And then so thank you for those. And so we had a little bit of yeah, so if we were going to do a quick like direct versus indirect impacts, but I feel like a lot of us have also touched upon all of this today. So I think I'm going to go ahead and skip this one because I do have the answer key on the next slide. So I think I might just go over that instead. Oh, I hit annotate. I'm like, why is it not moving? So when we were looking at some like direct CO2 sources that are in each of our areas, so car exhaust is a huge one. So figuring out how to like decrease the idling of car pickups would make a giant difference in each of some of your areas. Factory productions, you all mentioned, you know, Amazon is a giant contributor of CO2 to the planet. Electricity production, how much electricity do you use? You know, do you leave lights on or off or things plugged in because they all, you know, keep bringing those out. But like even the factories that like are making electricity, the more we can transition to like more cleaner and renewable sources of energy, the better and less of an impact we will have on CO2. But then some of the more personal ones, yep, a lot of you mentioned, you know, our own electricity. I know Anne mentioned it before, but heating and cooling of your house, diet choices is a surprising one, I think, for a lot of people. And that meat is a very high like CO2 emitter. So the more plant-based products that you can make, the better, or eat, the better. And if they're more locally grown, so they don't have to travel as far. And then the items that you use, I think Brooke and a few of you also touched upon that as well, like single-use plastics versus reusable plastics versus just reusing items in general, like your grocery store bags, water bottles, and those are more on an individual level, but also just thinking about like how are companies treating these types of ideas, how are schools treating these types of ideas, how can we make each of our like communities more sustainable, and just keeping that in the back of your mind when you're thinking about a lot of these things. So we have a little carbon footprint activity for you, which is we put a footprint so like, you know, fuel is a big, fuel and cars are big emitters, but also like being conscious about your own waste. How much are you consuming? How much are you producing individually as a person, as a family unit, as like a driver, etc. And so we do have a quick carbon emissions quiz. So oops, I think I went too far. So if we could spend a little time, because this one is about your home or your apartment or whatever that might look like for you. So if you could spend a little bit of time doing that one, and my apologies for missing what's in the chat. Libby brought in Uber Eats or other food delivery services using cars. Elaine's spouse working with Grubhub. Oh, he worked with Grubhub to do census work? Huh. Interesting. Oh, and then Kyla, thank you for addressing this. But if you could take a few minutes to fill out your carbon emissions quiz. This is more of an adult one, I would say, but there are also a ton of kid-friendly ones that I would recommend that your kids do with their families, so that they can also try and figure out where are most of their emissions coming from and what could they do on a personal level, on a family level, and on a community level to make some change. I could have sworn this had music. I wanted another little pirate dance song or something. Yeah, and for me, my answers changed a lot because I did it focusing on my like pandemic-based experiences. So my transportation one went way down. Because if I had done it while I was still commuting from Chino to Los Angeles. You all doing okay on it? Yeah, I liked this one because I think it really divided it well into some of the like major components that would cause like be part of your life. Elaine?
Yeah, I was looking at the cars question. I'm like, wait, we barely use the car now.
Yeah. So imagine that during regular time for if
Yeah.
you are commuting to CSULB on a daily basis. What does that look like? Well, how different would that be? And for me, I really liked how when I chose the different options, it said like an increase of this many carbon dioxide. So I was like, oh my God, can I change my answer?
Yeah, exactly. Like, because what we usually do is like we drop off the kids at school, and then I go to work, and it's like, okay.
It was interesting for me because I commute as well. So it was like, okay, pandemic me or non-pandemic me?
Exactly.
Or like miles commuted makes a big difference, because if I'm driving 5 minutes down city streets to the opposite side of tiny town, that's a lot different than if I were driving up into San Jose or something.
Exactly.
Or like the kind of commute that you have, DJ.
Yeah, I do 100 miles. So
DJ, you're still a rock star for your commute, though.
I'm so glad about there's some silver lining for the privilege of not having to drive to work every day during the pandemic. Elaine, I saw you unmuting.
Oh, yeah, for me, it's the airplanes, because I do a lot of traveling just because my family is in Illinois and I love global travel. But yeah, you do. I know DJ does too, and I know it's bad for the environment, but I love it so much. And then this year I'm like, I took one trip in February and that's it.
Yep.
I would have probably been on like 8 to 10 airplanes this year by now. So
yeah, I feel that. I also love traveling. So I also do feel guilty or eco-anxious about my my amount of plane usage, but I also love it very much.
I wonder if
oh God, stuff.
I wonder if this will make some people rethink their method of travel after this pandemic.
Yeah. I for me, I hope a lot of these virtual options stay options, especially for some of the conferences, because a lot of the conferences I usually go to are very like expensive and inequitable for a lot of people that could represent, and they're expensive because of travel. They're expensive because registration includes space and like all of these other things. But yeah, I agree. Does anyone want to share? It's set up to multiple share. Does anyone want to share some of their results? I can stop sharing mine real quick.
Judgment-free zone in terms of CO2 emissions. We all have our contributions,
I'll share ours. This was what I kind of took, and I had to go. We have 3 adults in our household.
Mm-hmm.
So it was interesting for me that, for our CO2 emissions, and I was kind of thinking pandemic lifestyle right this moment, but my husband is a photojournalist that still has to commute 5 to 6 days a week. Like he's out right now. So I still have to have like transportation in there for him, although I'm home teaching, he still has to go out and about. So this was kind of our thing. And food has changed because now instead of going out, I tend to send him with his lunches versus, and he doesn't always like it, but I tend to send him with food versus him going by everywhere, like running through McDonald's, running through wherever. So that kind of changed for pandemic lifestyle for us. But otherwise, I know transportation's a huge one because I also commute to work in a normal day.
Got it. Thank you for sharing, Libby. Does anyone else want to share?
I don't seem to be able to put a screen. I'm on my phone, so I was trying to do sharing a screenshot into the chat, but I don't think it's letting me do that.
I mean, you can just discuss what you see.
That's fair. Let me go back to it. So we have 4 adults in our household. We've got me and my boyfriend, and then his sister and her husband. We can't really control their TV use other than pretending we have peak hours and telling them not to use their stuff during 3 to 8 or whatever, because PG&E up here is just keeps changing peak hours, so we can keep being like, oh no, now they're this. But it says that for household energy use, we've got 23.68% versus the average of 40.6. So that's good, I guess. Our transportation is 37%, and food is 39%. But it didn't really give any options between like lots of meat or a little bit of meat, vegetarian. So I think the test could probably have a little more distinction in some of the categories that we know can have be big contributors. But I guess overall our numbers mostly look good other than the food part.
Thank you for sharing. Elaine Bernal.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm considering too, like, pre-pandemic versus post, like current pandemic. So we're pretty good as far as like transportation. Let's see. Yeah, we haven't flown anywhere in a year, over a year actually. It's been a while. Let's see. Yeah, food. Since we do eat everything, so a lot of the numbers come from that. Let's see here. I should just share it. There you go. Analysis. Share button. Share button. Sorry. There you go. All right. Cool. There you go. Yeah. Yeah. So these are our numbers. It's interesting because it's like, yes, it is lower than the average, but compared with the rest of the world, I forgot what the numbers are too. But like, yeah, I mean, I know as a country, we're like number one producer of CO2. So certainly, like the kids, especially, I think, play a lot of video games. So I was like, whoa, that's where it went up. There you go. But overall, we try to be pretty good about turning the lights off when no one's in the room, turning things off when we're not using them. But I mean, with online learning and online, virtual teaching and everything, so computers are like always on too, like, 7-8 hours a day. So I think that's where a lot of that's coming from right now.
Very true. And that'd be a great, doing this and asking your kids to do the same too, of like, what was this pre-pandemic and what is this now?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Has your own footprint and like carbon footprint changed because of the pandemic?
Yeah, we're certainly not eating as much as we used to, eating out as much as we used to. So that really has really impacted things. I'm like, oh, okay, that's made a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
And so the question then becomes, what would you do to greenify your school or your community? And so for us, we would ideally want to see some measurable change on your CO2 sensor, depending on where you put it. But think about like, what are some some things that you would really like to see, and what are some things that you think are attainable for your school or community?
So Libby said indoor plants and more green spaces.
Okay. How would you want to facilitate that, Libby?
I'm the trouble one that has pet plants in my room already.
I don't think that's a trouble one. I think that's wonderful.
But no, I mean, even just bringing green space into a classroom, whether it's window gardens or, I know I've been in classrooms where the windows don't even open. So, it's like just getting the kids to even experience growing seeds like lima bean seeds. They all get excited about something simple as that at the lower grades, and sometimes just, you know, bringing that home with them, showing them that you can have an indoor garden or an indoor plant, you know, kind of teach that aspect. But also, in addition, you know, creating, a lot of the schools don't necessarily have green space, so you're creating that indoor green space for them to learn that there are other ways. I mean, I wish we could all create rooftop gardens for them, but you know, that's a pipe dream.
I feel them, the pipe dreams. I feel them. But thank you for sharing your indoor plants and potential roof gardens. Brooke, did you wanna say yours?
Yeah, so I think one of the things is like public transportation, like to the school. I know for some of you, like with the little guys, like putting them on a public bus is not really an option, but for the older kids, like them, like taking buses or like trains, and especially now with like a lot of LA County, like the cities are trying to convert their like the public transportation system to have like for the buses themselves to be greener, instead of having so many cars like come to the school. Yeah, I mean, we have over 4,000 kids at the high school, so it is a lot of vehicles, of parents coming, picking kids up, kids driving their own cars, teachers driving their own cars. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you for sharing, bro. Elaine, did you want to describe that one?
Yeah, we used to require parents to come in with their kids for safety reasons, which makes sense. But we've recently allowed older kids with parent consent to allow their kids to come on public transit or bikes or whatever, so the parents aren't having to drive with their kids.
Very nice.
And it's worked out. We just have to like call the parents and be like, yep, your kid showed up. So
nice.
But yeah, it's only 12 and older, I think.
How about you, Miss Wynn? What would you do in Norwood?
Well, green space. I like the idea, but the school is full of cement and asphalt. We have a garden that's towards the back end, and that used to be, I remember planting in it and eating off of it.
Nice.
But that's been a while. I like Libby's idea where you're like, you know, I think teaching them that they can grow their own food, you know, locally kind of like source food, because there are some plants that are actually durable because of the environment we're in.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would help. So that would, I guess, reduce trips to grocery stores. It's not like, so I like that idea. I mean, I'm not sure how that would be like implemented. Like I can see it implementing in a classroom versus like school wide.
When what I do, and I'm on a portable, so my porch or my ramp, you know, has become a potted garden because I'm on the playground essentially because I was the extra classroom. But I've always turned that porch into like a potted garden. And so I jokingly, the kids have their pet plants that they're responsible for watering, things like that. So that's the way I kind of made it, that they take ownership of it. And then, yes, they even name the plants. So
that's cute. I love the pet plants idea.
No, I like that idea. That's why I'm saying, I was like, let me think about that.
I don't know where your classroom's located.
My classroom, well, this year we're in the main building and I'm on the second floor.
Yeah, I know when I've done that, I just did window garden, you know, like I did smaller pots and, you know, smaller plants. So, you know, and worst case they die and you plant another one and another seed and you learn from that. And
yeah.
that, you know, that's part of the learning process for my kids.
No, I agree. No, that's true, because it's not going to live forever. Even if you plant it and you put it on the ground and allow it to grow.
Very true. And then if you did each of your greenification projects, what impact are you hoping it would have on your CO2 sensor?
Bring it down, right? Have a better reading?
That is the hope, yes. And so I do like Libby's suggestion of like figuring out like one, where are you going to put the sensor, and then two, if you are going to grow plants, do you see if there's going to be like, do you put up shelving maybe in the hallway, probably at adult height, not child height. But no, there's been some wonderful suggestions in here as well.
Elaine, that's adorable about your sunflower.
Yeah, there was like one tiny dirt patch and we grew one sunflower. And the kids each got one seed and they were like, this is the greatest day ever.
That's hilarious.
I didn't, big companies like Home Depot and stuff, I have not found that they would donate pots when I was looking for it, because all mine got smashed last year, or, you know, last school year. Some kids decided to come by and trash them. But I have found that smaller hardware stores, more the mom and pop stores, are the ones that are more willing to donate to the classrooms.
Speaking of that, thank you for bringing that up, Libby. Lowe's has Toolbox for Education grants. They're up to $5,000 of money spent at Lowe's. So if there is a big project that you might want to do at your school, like some of these greenification projects, Lowe's has some decent chunks of money for educators. Home Depot, they give about $25 gift cards if you request them from the manager, but they're usually also kind of resistant. So I would highly recommend looking up Lowe's Toolbox for Education grants. But then, so now that you've learned a little bit more about CO2 today, about potential CO2 sensors, some ideas for greenifying your schools, what are some connections that you see to both literacy and math? Because I know that especially for the elementary educators in here, that's a giant focus. So what are some ways that you see connections in what we've learned about and discussed today?
Well, discussion, right? That's important, because in order to even write, you have to be able to say what you're trying to write. So discussion is important, because my students right now, they really don't talk.
That's tough.
Elaine K, have you noticed with your kids, because I noticed with mine, like with the sunflowers, mine are more willing to talk about the plants and things like when they've had access to them. So it brings in the math and the adding, measuring, and it makes measuring more obtainable for them, because sometimes they're like, huh, what, why, but when they see something change, they're more apt to learn about it.
Yeah, I found good success with the long-term projects. Like the kids want to come back and see what happened, or they want to, like every day they're like, can we measure it? Can we measure it? And I'm like, in 1 hour, it has not changed, so no. But they're like, they do kind of get attached to those. I've also found if you get one kid excited, the whole class will be excited. And then the idea, I haven't tried it with anything else, but I kind of like the idea of trying to grow food with this idea that the kids could eat it. We didn't plan that with the sunflower, but it happened.
Like green beans and things like that.
Right.
So that way it's small enough that they can taste it and it doesn't need to be cooked.
Right. Like tomatoes are really hard to grow, but I'm trying to think of beans are really resilient and can grow really easily. So
yeah, and that brings up some great ideas of like either hydro or aquaponics, which can be pretty self-contained usually. Tomatoes grow great hydroponically, actually. So that would be a wonderful way of also doing that. Yeah, because growing your own food and then being able to eat it, I think would, if we're trying to tie this all back to, environmental justice issues, food deserts are also a giant issue with a lot of the communities that we serve. So if you're able to grow either a garden at the school or in your classroom or your location, growing food that the students that work with you can eat, I think would also it combines what Elaine put into the chat of learning, seeing these trends of growth of CO2, reading graphs, some data. There's definitely a lot of data literacy here as well. And then I also loved Miss Wynn's earlier suggestion of the discussions as well. There's many ways to set these up. I mean, I've gotten like a plastic 50-gallon bin for like $3 from the store and just cut holes into the lid and put little like hydroponic, it's not hydroponic soil, but like hydroponic nutrient-y things, and then grew tomato plants in classrooms. Went pretty well until one of them leaked and flooded the classroom. So grain of salt. And then
layer the bottom.
Very true. There's also some really, really cheap ones, like Back to the Roots has a whole bunch of food growing stuff. And because, a lot of the students don't actually know where their food comes from and what connections that might have to climate change as well. I wasn't sure what we were looking at in terms of time for today. And so I did, let me make this a little smaller. I did have, I love Get Epic as a wonderful resource for books and like free books and things that you can read digitally. So there's some wonderful books that I've added to the collection that relate to climate change at the elementary level. There was Helping the Polar Bears, Clean and Green Energy. Oops, sorry, let me go back and I'll explain them all first. My Wounded Island is about a climate refugee. So adding some more of the like cultural competency lens to that as well. Of course, Magic School Bus, can't not put Magic School Bus in there. And then I really liked the perspective from this one, Climate Change from Minute Earth. They discuss, there's different people in there that discuss like, I'm from Venezuela, this is how climate change is impacting me. I'm from...
Description to help you find your representative's contact. We put ear-splitting alarms in houses to warn us of its dangerous presence.
Carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide are also invisible gases.
But without unignorable alarms in place, they've been allowed to cause rapid and dangerous changes to the climate, oceans, and ecosystems on Earth.
Here's what that looks like for us, the Minute Earth team, where we live around the world.
I'm Henry, and in the dry Rocky Mountains, drought and wildfires are becoming more frequent and more dangerous. So we're spending far more resources to protect our businesses and homes, and then far more days inside them each summer because the smoke is too thick to safely go outside.
I'm Kate, and those same droughts in the Rockies mean that less water makes its way down the Colorado River, causing Lake Mead, which supplies water to me and 20 million other people, to drop to record low levels.
I am Ever, and here in Venezuela, droughts also threaten the Guri Reservoir and all the hydroelectric plants that depend on it, putting more than 60% of our electricity generation at risk.
I'm Emily, and in New York City, our biggest problem isn't too little water, but too much. Right now, we're still recovering from Hurricane Sandy, while also trying to fortify the city against the even fiercer storms and bigger storm surges of the future.
I am Omkar, and storms are also becoming more of a problem in Mumbai, India, with larger surges from the ocean and more intense rainfall on the land, like the record-breaking meter of rain that fell in 24 hours in 2005, destroying homes and killing more than 1,000 people.
I'm Alex, and here in Cambodia, increasingly unpredictable monsoons threaten the livelihoods of the rice farmers and fishers who make up half the population. This year, the rains were late, which damaged young plants and lowered the productivity of the rivers, contributing to a 50% smaller catch than last year.
I'm Peter, and in Minnesota, warmer weather means less snow and ice for our winter sports and tourism, and threatens the very survival of our northern forest and many of their creatures.
Some of these experiences might sound familiar to you.
Or perhaps you have your own story about what climate change looks like where you live.
The question is, how big will we let those impacts become?
If we're going to act, we have to act now to keep the effects of climate change as small as possible.
So share your perspective with your political representatives, favorite businesses, family, and friends, and get them involved.
Since these gases are invisible, we need to make ourselves as visible as possible
so that the leaders of Earth can see that we, its citizens, want our nations to agree to a legally binding limit on greenhouse gas emissions.
To make that easier, we put links in the video description to help you find your representative's contact information.
And at the very least, you can add your name to the mega climate petition for a 100% clean world.
Yeah, so Get Epic has a wonderful, like, age-appropriate set of both videos. Sorry. No, don't start. Set of videos and books and stuff like that. So if you're interested in some of the ones that we had picked for these, I can also send that in the email, the follow-up email that you'll all be getting as well. Yeah. And now, so we are almost at 12 o'clock. I know it's been almost 3 hours together. But if you could take a little bit of time and fill out our post test as well, we would really appreciate you. I
sent it in the chat, so it's easily accessible there.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kyla. Yeah, and then Libby said that she has also hydroponically grown plants, even in mason jars. And
here's a kit that I just got from a friend. So it's a mason jar with a little hydroponic kit. It just has yeah. So it's just a little jar. I haven't planted it yet. It's cilantro, and then it comes with a little, things to put in. Sorry, it's loud. But so this is a way that you could easily do it in your classroom. I mean, it was a gift, so I can't say how expensive or inexpensive, but I was, but it's an interesting little kit that for a classroom, something like this might be more accessible than on a larger scale. This is for cilantro.
Yeah, and if the components are basic enough for how to make a mason jar hydroponic, we can figure it, even if it's just, gravel or whatever at the bottom.
Yeah, so I just thought that I remembered it was in my kitchen, and I went, oh, hold on, let me go get it.
I love it. Ooh, this one has music.
And I put the link in the chat, so let me know if it doesn't work.
Miss Swain, were you able to get it in the chat?
Yeah, my other computer froze.
Got it. I was wondering why there's two of you in here.
Well, I want to make sure I didn't lose the information. I can hear everything. I just can't move it. And I don't want to restart it yet.
Makes sense.
So I log on to another device. This is ridiculous.
Got you.
Thank you, though.
Awesome. And if you need a little bit more time, just you can go ahead and do that afterwards. But we would love for you all to submit the post test to us. I also put in the chat if any of you would like to send us a quote about how today's workshop went for you that we can put in our newsletter. We would love you forever. We don't have too much more left. So we did want to put all of our contact information out there for you. You know, Kyla, she's a graduate student in marine environmental biology and oceanography. And so she would make a wonderful guest speaker to come in and talk to your students about plankton, about climate change, etc. I'm always available for whatever you all need me to do. So feel free to get in contact with me however you see fit. We do have all of the 5E lesson plans and all of, we did a sampling of all of them. We didn't do them in their entirety because it would take too long. But we have a sampling of or the full lesson plans. We have the data recording sheets and how to build a CO2 sensor is all linked here. So Kyla, if you could copy over some of those links in the chat, just in case. I mean, you'll all be getting this PowerPoint file if you don't have it already, but you'll also be these are all available to you as well. And then for those of the more formal educators in the room, or those to be formal educators, this workshop is attached to one salary or continuing education unit. And so please send me an email if you would like this. I mean, what I can do is I can attach it to my follow-up email to you all. So if you do want to do to get the continuing education unit, this workshop today counts as 3 hours. And so you just have to show me evidence of 7 hours of related things. And so, you know, if you get the CO2 sensor and are working on putting it together, that's going to take you forever. That could definitely take up some of those hours. If you make your own PowerPoint slides or make something for your own students and test out a lesson plan, etc., that all counts. Right now, I have the roster deadline of doing those things before December 30th. I can easily extend that. And the transcript for the one CEU from Rossier is $35. So it's not USC tuition for one unit, which is god awful expensive. I think it's $2,000 a unit now or something insane like that, right? Yeah. So it's only $35 for you to get a CEU, and then that can be applied to some of your salary credit stuff. So I will put that form that you see screenshotted on the left. I'll make sure to include it. But yeah, that's kind of it for what we had today. I don't know if people want to do a group photo or not. I think some of you were hesitant. So I took a screenshot of Kyla doing her experiment. So if you're not wanting to do a photo, let me know.
I consent.
I consent. We just, we want to be conscious of everyone in the digital realm. There's also some fun climate visualization. So I did wear my climate change dress for you all today. It's from 1880 till 2019, so it gets worse. And there's a matching climate scarf if you would like the pattern, also from 1880 until now. So some ways to also add some visualizations and data literacy for your students. All right, I'm going to take a quick great screenshot. Kyla, you're in two places.
Oh, my computer stopped, but I guess now I don't know if it's working or not. I don't think it's working.
All right, so I'm going to take a picture in 3, 2, 1. Beautiful. Thank you all. Ooh, I like it, Elaine. Are you wearing your coding dress today?
You bet I am.
Yes.
There you go. Wait. There you go.
I have that one. Oh, I love it. But yeah, that's kind of it for what we have today. If you all have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out, and I'll stay on for a little bit longer for any of you that want to ask anything now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for having this. This is great.
I'm so glad you all could join us.
Yeah, thank you for joining.
There's no way for me to get back
Thank you for hosting.
Anytime. But yeah, are there any questions from the people that are still in here?
No, we can leave, right?
Yeah, I tried to keep. I want to be respectful of y'all's time, so I tried to keep it 2:12. So it is exactly 12 right now.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Ms. Wynn. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'll see you on Monday, DJ.
Sounds good.
Bye.
I was just gonna say hi, DJ.
Hi. How are you in the MAT program now, right? I feel like you were doing some type of school. Were you not doing some type of school? Are you sure? Okay. But how are things at the Science Center? Because I knew you were furloughed for a little bit.
I came back for summer camp.
Okay.
Which went really well. And then we are now putting together a virtual field trip program.
Ooh. So how are you doing that?
This is our first time ever adhering to NGSS standards. Usually we try to use NGSS practices.
Mm-hmm.
But we're gonna do 3 modules.
Okay.
One for life science, physical science, and earth science per grade level.
Got it.
So we're writing activities. There's going to be a recorded video, and then there's going to be an optional live session.
Nice. Oh, that's
where you can like come to the Science Center. Yes. So we're trying to write activities that don't require supplies. And so it's going well, but it's pretty busy, and I feel like everyone's in their own uncharted territory. So
I feel that. Let me I can share with you, we had to look at all of our curriculum and make it at home friendly.
Right.
And for those supplies that we knew kids wouldn't have, we did put together some STEM kits.
Yeah, that's what we did for summer. We mailed everyone boxes.
Yeah.
Which was insane. Yeah, like we turned into Amazon assembly, basically.
I am extremely well aware of this.
Right. Oh, I know. I saw JEP posted some things too. So.
But we are converting a lot of our stuff for the teachers that can't access us. We've been putting together some videos of all of our lesson plans, and so like how each of them have an activity, especially the young scientist ones, of like grade appropriate NGSS aligned activities that they can be done at home. So if there's any ideas that you would like, feel free to subscribe and stalk the crap out of that YouTube channel.
Will. Yeah, we've usually done like, oh, this is about constructing an argument, or this one's about using a model, but this is the first time we're actually like, oh, this is the actual standard. And luckily we have a professional development team that knows a lot more about the standards than I do. But I'm constantly like, so when you're saying use a model, is this a model? Does this count? So
yeah. Well, I hope you liked our lessons today.
No, it was good. I'm all for like ecology and climate change kind of lessons, but I feel like they mostly end up very depressing. They're like, look at how bad the world is. So
yeah, that's why we tried to turn the greenification on, like, yeah, you can do things about it, like, climate change.
Yeah, I know there's a ton of grants out there to do like aquaponic systems, and there's room at the Science Center to do that. But the former principal was very resistant to it because of the potential flooding. But we have a new principal now.
I know. So. Yeah, they don't, the CSC guy, he was not my biggest fan.
Who?
The new principal at the California Science Center School.
I haven't met him yet.
Yeah, no, no one actually looked at the supplies that we were getting people, because we made everything at home friendly, right? So like some of the stuff we put in kits were like Starbursts, Skittles, pipettes, straws, and our science journals in like a Ziploc bag.
Right.
And I had sent them everything of like, here's an itemized list of everything I'm sending to your parents, but no one opened it. And so when they had the supply distribution, some of the parents were really pissed off. They're like, why did I take time off of work to come pick up Skittles, like random ass crap, and like actually threw it back in my, like one of my people's face. And so the principal was there watching all this of just like, why, like, cause he's new. And so he's like, he's trying to avoid all the drama. And so all the people were like, yeah, so he's not my biggest fan. And so do you know her, Michelle Correa? So she's a teacher and a coordinator too. But they, yeah, so I sent her a gift card. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I did not mean to cause you drama.
Yeah, we had that issue too, where people are like, you just gave us